Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another Lord of the Rings lore video. But first let me say this video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon community. I really appreciate the continued support. And welcome to my newest Patreons. Thank you to Crawdad and thank you to Nicole Warden. I really appreciate the support. Anyway, Amazon's Lord of the Rings TV show is on the horizon, and the TV show now confirms it will be set during the Second Age of Middle-earth. The map they tweeted shows Numenor, a kingdom of men that helped to defeat and capture the Dark Lord Sauron, only to eventually fall due to his corrupting its leaders from within, causing them to sail against the Valar. Iluvatar himself intervened and reshaped the earth, or Arda, and sinking the island in the process. During the Third Age, when the books and the movies take place, Numenor had been lost for thousands of years. Elendil, son of the leader of the faithful, and his sons and followers had been warned of the disaster that was to come to Numenor, and they had set sail before the island fell. They landed in Middle-earth and founded the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. So this confirms that Lord of the Rings on Amazon will take place during the Second Age, not to mention they literally tweeted, "Welcome to the Second Age." So with that said, what is the Second Age, and why is it exciting for fans of Lord of the Rings? J.R.R. Tolkien divided the history of Middle-earth into 4 ages or eras. The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings take place during the Third Age, but now the fans of Lord of the Rings get to see the events that build up to that if indeed the Lord of the Rings on Prime is set during the Second Age. The Second Age spans 3,441 years and ends with the downfall of Sauron, the Dark Lord, and most notably, the Lord of the Rings himself. Speaking of Sauron, I will link the video I just published on the history of Sauron in the description below, as well as a card up above. Now the movies began with the prologue set at the end of the Second Age explaining Sauron's defeat, so it seems Amazon's series will take place in the years where Sauron rises to power. Events in the Second Age that we may see could include Sauron building his forces in Mordor, the creation and use of the Rings of Power, and undoubtedly the destruction of Numenor as stated earlier. The Second Age ends with the final destruction of the One Ring in the volcano Mount Doom, where it was originally forged. Numenor will definitely play a major role during the Second Age. This is the island west of Middle-earth where the Fathers of Men, or Edain, were given a gift from the Valar, essentially the angels of this world, and the one god Iluvatar raised this island for them in return for them standing with the elves to destroy Morgoth, the old master of Sauron. They were given one rule upon receiving the island, never to sail west out of sight of the island, because there lay the Dying Lands, the lands reserved for the immortals. This would later come back to bite them. Along with Numenor, the founding of Lindon, the major Elvish kingdom, also took place during the Second Age. The Second Age being the longest of the Middle-earth time periods, it can be subdivided into 4 millennium. During the First Millennium, some of the notable events that took place were, along with the Numenor of men, the Elvish realm Lindon was ruled by Gil-galad, the last High King of the Noldor, and this kingdom lays between the mountains of Ered Luin and the Great Sea, and from its Grey Havens, Elven ships sailed to the west daily. Rivendell was also founded by Elrond about halfway through the Second Age. During this time, Sauron, who had been pushed back after his master had been defeated and cast into the void, returned from the unknown lands of the east and settled into the land of Mordor and created his great tower, Barad-dûr, or the Dark Tower. During the Second Millennium, some notable events also took place. For example, the War of the Elves and Sauron took place during this time, where Sauron wanted revenge for his master. Since the men of Numenor couldn't sail west, they indeed headed east and started establishing permanent residence in Middle-earth. Also during this time, Elrond, who you might be familiar with, established the elven town of Rivendell in the Misty Mountains, and this of course is where the Fellowship of the Ring would later be formed. During this time, most fans will be excited to see that Sauron created the Rings of Power, the 3 rings of the elves, and finally the One Ring to rule them all. During the Third Millennium of the Second Age, we would also see the first appearance of the Nazgl, or the ring race that you may recognize from the movies. They were formerly the 9 leaders of men who were corrupted by Sauron and the Rings of Power. They became the top servants of Sauron and would seek the One Ring of Power from Bilbo Baggins. Sauron got this information from a former hobbit in his capture named Smeagol, or Gollum as he is now called, because he knew the whereabouts of the One Ring. And during the Fourth Millennium, the men of Numenor lands at the haven of Umbar to defeat Sauron, but he surrenders there with no resistance as part of his big master plan. This would lead to the downfall of Numenor and the destruction of the island for breaking the cardinal rule of not sailing west. The king, Al-Pharazôn, sailed west after being corrupted by Sauron, who was still his captive. The one god Iluvatar destroyed them all, remaking the world from flat to a globe shape, and the island and its inhabitants were lost forever. This included the body of Sauron, although his spirit remained. Also, as I mentioned before, this is when we see the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor, both founded in Middle-earth during the Second Age by the sons of the Numenor who didn't sail west to the Forbidden Lands. And finally, we would see the last alliance of elves and men to stand against Sauron. The king of men, Elendil, and the king of elves, Gil-galad, were both killed during this battle. Elendil's son, Isildur, would cut the One Ring from Sauron's finger to defeat him, but of course Isildur would fail to actually destroy the One Ring. But nevertheless, the defeat of Sauron ended the Second Age after 3,441 years. And we will continue covering the Lord of the Rings lore and much, much more as we head towards the Lord of the Rings TV show on Amazon. So if you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And of course, be sure to subscribe to get everything so you won't miss any more lore from your favorite worlds. And also, please consider joining our Patreon community as we have some really, really cool stuff planned, as well as become a beta reader for my own fantasy novel. I'm 12 chapters in, and it may end up being a trilogy. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.